This Steve Jones Show podcast is now loading. The Steve Jones Show podcast is presented by Sunbury Motor Company, Purdy Insurance, Brewers Outlet, and NIL Game Changers. Bringing you an in-depth look at Penn State sports and more. This is the Steve Jones Show on News Radio 1070 WKOK. The Steve Jones Show is presented by NIL Game Changers, Sunbury Motor Company, Purdy Insurance, and Brewers Outlet. Now from the Sunbury Motor Studio, here's Steve Jones.
This half hour brought to you by Purdy Insurance, Market Street in Sunbury. Go to purdyinsurance.com. Auto, home, life, business, boat, motorcycle, RV. You have a multitude of insurance needs. They handle them all, and they do everything they can to save you money. Customer service means everything to them. And don't forget about the Purdy Memorial Golf Tournament, Wednesday, August 7th, Susquehanna Valley Country Club to benefit the Susquehanna Valley United Way. Looking forward to that very much. We will be out there for that as the Purdys continue to give back to the community. Purdy Insurance, Market Street in Sunbury. Go to purdyinsurance.com. All right, it's Tuesdays. Time now for Tuesdays with Neal. Sir, welcome.
Always is my pleasure to be here. I hope you guys are doing as well as I am.
Well, let's start with this. We are into the spring session of the NFL, and now there are rumblings that the players do not want to do any more spring sessions but have a longer training camp. What is your thought on that?
You know, I remember when the OTA concept became, what do we want to say, finalized, like when they hammered it out. I always kind of thought it was more like set up checkpoints for the players to have to come check in, more so than actually do anything. And a lot of that was, and people within the league say this, it's to put eyes on the players, to kind of make sure they can't go run hog wild for too long, and in that, make sure they're in shape, make sure that their weight still looks about what they would want it to be. A lot of things that are not exactly collectively bargained. And in that, the union has been looking to have this done for a while now. This isn't really new. It's funny because it came out of nowhere today. I didn't even realize that they were negotiating it. But if you look at it logically, here's what the players ultimately would like. Push back when we have to come back to do football stuff. Don't have a gap between OTAs and training camp. It's about 6 weeks that goes into it there. Mm-hmm. Just give us the entire time off. We'll show up at, I haven't seen exact dates of when they were mentioning, but probably mid to latest June. Have us do all the stuff then go into training camp. And to me, it makes the most sense. It's the most logical way from a physical perspective. It's better for a player doing all the things, kind of work themselves back into football shape at that point, if that's even such a thing that can be done anymore. I feel like you pretty much have to be conditioned 12 months out of the year. But have it lead into camp as opposed to let's do these voluntary things that we show up for and then take off for another 6 weeks after that. From a financial perspective, I think you'd probably get more attendance. There's not a gap in between it. A lot of it is per diem, and just to dive into that quickly, the players get X amount of dollars per day to show up to these things. I know that it's voluntary, but their teams are still obligated to pay them a per diem for being there, and the smart players show up because it's money, and why would you want to reject that? If that leads right into training camp, then there's a certain level of continuity I think that makes sense. They can just stay in town and kind of do it all at once and have your body at it's most ready to jump right into camp, which is where things really count. So in this proposal, what they're basically saying is just to have all the voluntary stuff right leading up into camp. Then most places have their facility is the host of their training camp anyway, so they're all there. They're used to being there. They're used to being together. That level of continuity, I think, is beneficial for an athlete. And in that, it honestly would make the most sense. I don't really know from an ownership perspective why they wouldn't want to do it for any reason that they can publicly discuss. They would like to have it earlier just, to get a look at players, especially right after the draft, to know who they have, to know what type of shape that they're in, and get a sense of how what they're going to be facing come training camp. It's probably something the owners will have to have to let go of eventually. But in this case, I think it makes the most sense just to start all of it. And it's not too far away from the time that they used to basically do it like that. But it's probably best all around just to have it start late June or mid to late June, whenever that exact date is, and have it run into training camp just for the sake of keeping everybody together, keeping the unit together. It'd be a lot easier than just having them come back and then setting them loose for 6 more weeks.
Yeah, I mean, look, if you're a veteran, I don't think tack on another week to the front of training camp. Fine. I mean, I'm fine with OTAs though for the free agents and rookies, just so they know who they have and who actually take a minute and see which ones they actually want to bring to camp. Now that's a different proposition to me.
Yeah, exactly. You need as much time as you can to evaluate everything, or at least they're convinced that that's the way it needs to be. It's important to remember too, though, that we're still talking about OTAs. They're not. This isn't like pre-training camp in the sense that they're going to go out and do contact drills and everything like that. It's still going to be the OTAs as we know them, except the dates are just changed. They are still voluntary. They're not able to change that within the CBA, and certainly the players aren't lobbying for tacking on a month to training camp. I'm sure the owners would love that. It has nothing to do with the scheduling. It's not going to be preseason games or anything like that. It's just not having OTAs starting right around Memorial Day and having them go through a good chunk of June before, kind of releasing them for what's left of the summer. You put it all together, I think you have best mix of evaluation opportunities when you're allowed to evaluate. Granted, don't use the word evaluate. They're not really allowed to do that. But put it into context, as Mike Tomlin would say, it gives them an opportunity to let the players know what they're going to be doing come training camp. Right. They're not evaluating them on the drills, but they are showing them how to do the drills, what the schedule will be like, getting used to what the coaches are telling them to do, the things that they're focusing on. It makes sense. It's kind of a live work study. It gives them a chance to prepare themselves. I feel, though, that type of preparation would be best, to get a sense of it going into camp, but then to go off 6 weeks on your own, I don't think they're in a better position because of that. They may as well just take it while it's fresh in their mind, go straight into camp, and then dig into the playbook, put on the pads, start getting actual coaching and be evaluated physically and mentally for your validity or to your value of being on that year's team. That's just me from a management perspective. I feel that makes more sense. I'm curious to hear if teams have any specific pushback to it, what their argument would be.
Well, this is where, again, let's think the way the NFL thinks, management size of it. So let's do that for a moment. All right. You know what? End of the season until training camp. And we'll only expand training camp by a week. But we want the 18th game.
I don't think you look at it like this. I think people tend to think it's always a binary situation. It's always yes versus no. I think to some degree would be wise to accept, if nothing else, next collective bargaining agreement, the 18th game is probably going to be the NFL's priority.
Yes, it is.
If they're going to want that, it behooves membership of the NFLPA to get something in return for it.
Yep.
if they flat don't want to do it, okay. But to be honest, I don't think they flat don't want to do it. I think that they want to get something significant for it, and they should. They only make sense, right? This is why the revenue is split on an overall percentage. So if there are more games, logically that money is going to filter back down to the players. They're not going to get a flat rate for the extra game. That's something that'll work itself out the same way it did when 17 games were there. What do the players want collectively? What do they want as a group that would justify the inclusion of the 17th game? Now, I know you and I have had this conversation a bunch, but it's just amazing to me how much more leverage ownership has in this negotiation, because while probably the average generation of players in the NFL is 3 years, give or take. That's about the average length of a career. So you're changing over a team pretty much entirely once every 3 years. I think that's fair to say. 90+% of your roster is different every 3 years. Those players go out of the league just as often as they go anywhere else. And depending on the circumstances, some are still, members of the union, and I don't know why they'd want to do that. If they're continuing their career, they want to be. They're paying dues on it. But in those pockets, those generations of players, priorities are completely different.
Yeah, that's right.
Different things for different people. This is how the NFL got the last CBA to go through with little to no resistance. What they did was offer a massive increase at the minimum level of salary to something that you might argue is closer to, relatively speaking, living wages in comparison to other sports, in comparison to, relative to the violence in which they are inflicting and taking on in their lives. It went up from, I believe, $325 at the absolute bargain basement level to $750 now, in exchange for essentially signing off critical health care issues and adding another game to the schedule. Now, players off the top of my head, too, that I can remember being outwardly against this, Aaron Rodgers, and at the time when he was playing, J.J. Watt.
Right.
These are two players back then that were making $25 million a year. Joe practice squad running back isn't J.J. Watt. He doesn't have that kind of money coming in. But if he's only going to play for 3 years, he's only going to get paid $325,000 for each of those 3 years. He'd love to have $750 instead of $325. Guess where he's going to vote?
Right.
If they play another game or not, he's not going to be on the team. He's going to be a fringe. Put him on the roster. Doesn't make a difference if he plays in the game or not. He's probably inactive. So the NFL shrewdly took probably a third of the league and said, we're going to pay you a lot more money. The issues that we want have nothing to do with you. May as well take it. So if you're the players now, you're remembering that. What are you able to come up with that would get you to want that extra game added? Because I remember you and I talking about this back then. They didn't add one game because they wanted one game. They want two.
Right. They
could get one right now. The next one is when they're going to go get the other one. So now they've not overplayed their hand, but it's pretty obvious what the league is going to want in the next round of negotiations. What do the players want back? What are they going to request? And I think shortening training camp, the reduction of preseason games was a part of it. Maybe they do that again. I don't know, but I would hope, for the sake of the players, their leadership is looking for a larger, chunk of something, along with more revenue. Of course, they're going to want more revenue. That's always what the conversation's about, but they're going to need something else. Maybe this is sort of a good faith test. Are you willing to do something that just simply makes sense? It eliminates a lot of the problems that wink, wink, nudge, nudge. We know you're doing, but you're not going to admit it. Don't evaluate us before it's time to evaluate us. Get rid of this. Make it make sense. and we'll continue to discuss with you an 18th game. But until then, we hope that you've got a little bit more than what you had last time, because you're not going to give the bottom class of the NFL 100% raise again.
So, one, you eliminate OTAs, no spring work. You add 1 week to training camp as a compensation for no OTAs. You reduce the number of preseason games to 2 and limit to 1 scrimmage that you can have in camp. You then go to the 18th game, and whatever revenue that comes out of adding an 18th game, you get 49% of that to be distributed. Oh, and by the way, we'll let you expand the roster from 53 to 56 because you'll need more. So that's 3 more jobs in the union per team, which means union dues as well.
Sounds to me like you're hammering all this out. I don't know if you're talking to Goodell or not. But
no, I ad-libbed that just off the top, seriously off the top of my head.
Roster expansion is interesting. That's something. Considering they've gone up in salary, the value of your 53rd man is considerably higher than it was a decade ago.
Mm-hmm.
COVID and post-COVID, they added to the practice squad. I wouldn't be surprised if the NFLPA really doesn't like the current practice squad rules. Any running back signed after week 1, which is when salaries become guaranteed, any running back signed after week 1 is signed in the practice squad. They're not signed in the active roster.
That's right.
Basically, they can use them up and down, which is really not what the practice squad is designed to do. I think that's kind of they're bending the spirit of something that does make sense. I believe in an expanded practice squad to an extent. There comes a point, though, that you've got to start rostering people, Maybe that's something the league would budge on with this. Interesting to me would be how, once again, that bottom level would get behind it, but the veteran players aren't going to care. They're not going to want to play another game just so there could be 3 more guys to compete to be, the shield on special teams, however they do special teams now and in the future. We'll find out, I guess.
Sure.
That's interesting. I do think that is a part of the negotiation. I think that's going to have to come up at some point. Maybe you or somebody with a bit more NFL history behind them could weigh in. When's the last time they changed the 53-man roster? I know that they've tweaked the game day roster a bunch in the last 10 years. I don't remember when the roster wasn't 53.
Right.
Maybe that is something they're interested in changing in the future. That's been set for quite a while, and the game has changed significantly just in the last 10, 15 years, let alone 30, which is what I'm suspecting it was. They cut the draft in half, and they kept it at 53. So I wonder how much the owners would really want to budge on that, but that could be something significant. Quick math off the top of my head, that's another 100 players in the league. The union would probably want something like that, I'd imagine. That's an interesting thought.
Well, this is one where the players have all the leverage, and they have to realize it. Get everything you want, okay? Get everything you want, because the owners are the ones that need the 18th game. You don't.
I would go back to this. I think you could always call a CBA a Cold War in some way. They're negotiating this every day. They're going to line up their priorities. They're going to, there's actionable items that'll come out that they need to negotiate in real time, and the CBA spells out exactly how they do that. Not everything is short of ratifying a new CBA. There are add-ins to it. The permanence of those add-ins is always something that's going to be negotiated. And I think really what we're talking about here is the players probably did not expect their union to ratify the 17th game as easily as it did. The key members of the union, and it's not even fair to call them that, but the most recognizable members of the union, i.e. the highest paid players, were not in favor of that because they're taking it on without any benefit. I think the players are going to go after a little bit more revenue for that other game now, along with some other things. In other words, they're going to want the league to pay a bit more to make up for what they didn't get the last time when they got, shrewdly beaten by the owners again. They're going to need a little bit more. This is also going to be what do you want to say? It's a generation of more division. There's more argument. There's more discourse that exists in society. I'd imagine they're used to fighting for whatever it is that's going to come up. And we're talking, it's a couple of years yet down the line. The next wave of actual generational players is in high school. They're seeing what's going on in the world. They're going to be aware of I would think anyway, they're going to be more aware of these types of things and go into it with the idea that we have to fight for change. We have to do something about this. Whether they will, I guess we'll wait and see, because frankly, ownership has won pretty much all of these probably since '87. But we'll see how it all turns out. It's actionable. I'll say that. I think the players have certainly more reason this time. But I also think the league would be wise to recognize that you really didn't pay for the 17th game. You're going to have to pay at least 1.5 for the 18th game now. It might be better off just giving it back to the players a little bit.
1993. I looked it up.
Wow, okay.
1993, 53-man roster with a couple of tweaks in there, here and there. My friend, always a pleasure. Only we can take the off season and turn it into a half-hour discussion.
It's absolutely true, and I appreciate it every week. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, my friend. Neal Coolong joining us on the show today. Always appreciate him very much. By the way, Tony Knopp on tomorrow's show. The segment The Suit Hates. That's why I wish we had him on every other day. What? Here on News Radio 1070 WKOK, brought to you by Purdy Insurance.
There's something to be said about a sale with a handshake, a service technician who really knows what he's doing. They can explain it in English what the problem is. There's nothing better than having that friend you could trust in the area. That's Sunbury Motors, where you get selection, knowledgeable salespeople, and prices that fit your budget, and more important, that friend you can trust. Welcome to Sunbury Motors, Kia, Ford, and Hyundai. You could shop other dealers and compare prices, but at Sunbury Motors, you get their lowest price promise. They research the current used vehicle market and guarantee their used car prices are the lowest. If you find a lower price, Sunbury Motors will beat it. 3 dealers all in one. See their full new and pre-owned inventory at sunburymotors.com. Pick out a vehicle you like and schedule your test drive online. Follow them on Facebook. Sunbury Motors Ford and Hyundai, North 4th Street, Sunbury, and Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf.
Spring has sprung, and it's time to dust off those insurance policies. For over 100 years, the Purdy Insurance Agency has been protecting families and businesses of the greater Susquehanna Valley and beyond. With the experience of our trained and knowledgeable staff, you can rest assured that your needs will be evaluated and met by some of the industry's best representatives. No matter what your insurance needs are, call Purdy Insurance today at 570-286-5855 or visit our website at purdyinsurance.com to see what we can do for you.